Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Real Estate Mogul MD. My name is Bob Bosick, and I'm a retired C-suite executive. And I have the privilege of speaking with medical professionals, high-income earners, and investors. We're here today to share the real-world journeys, along with the to-dos, and more importantly, the not-to-dos. And I have the pleasure of introducing, I've been looking forward since you scheduled Dr. Craig of Moffett. And I'm very excited to have you join us today. And take us a little on a little journey through your career. And welcome. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.
Very welcome. So I like to just kind of start about when was the age that you decided that you wanted to go to medical school? When did you know that with absolute certainty?
Slightly that stereotypical, always want to be a doctor thing. I wasn't severely sick as a child, but I did have a lot of health issues. Was in the hospital on and off, seen a bunch of doctors early on in life. So kind of knew I wanted to be in healthcare. I struggled in school initially due to some undiagnosed dyslexia, dysgraphia, and other learning disabilities. So initially, the first few years, I wouldn't have necessarily thought I would be a doctor because I wasn't small enough. I would say probably around age 8, when I started getting a better handle on my learning issues and started doing better in school, I kind of reflected back to, being involved in healthcare through being sick as a child. And so probably around age 7 or 8 is kind of when I cemented that in my brain. So,
wow, that's, I was raised with a medical doctor, and he didn't know he wanted to be a medical doctor, although he had a degree in biology until after he went to law school. Then he decided he was going to go to medical school. And I can't tell you the number of people, either in my family or friends, that just did tremendously well in school and had the intellectual horsepower, and they were always going to be a medical doctor. But boy, as soon as they hit college and they got pushed up against some of that competition and or otherwise, they started to deviate and develop other plans. So that's remarkable when I hear someone at such an early age lock in on something and know it with certainty and head that direction. Clearly, overcoming some of those obstacles you described as a child, most likely, and not most likely, it did dramatically shape, how you saw the world and through what lens and how you could help people. Tell me a little bit, just, I wasn't going to go down this path, but, what were the, how did it impact you, if you go back to your young self? Did you feel isolated when you were having those experiences and trying to figure out what was going on? Or did the other kids didn't pay attention, or what was that like for you?
I did. Not to be a sad story, I have wonderful parents, not of much means, but they were very, they were involved when we didn't have a whole lot of money for resources to get assistance. But I don't want to paint it as I had a bad childhood. But went to a very small kind of impoverished school. We got a whole lot of funding. There wasn't really people there to help with people with learning disabilities. I couldn't talk till I was about 5 or 6 because of some structural issues I had with my mouth and tongue. And that kind of coupled with my learning disabilities definitely made it socially hard for me. The standard kind of picked on to a small school type thing. Really didn't have a strong social network until probably high school. I mean, really throughout my elementary years, I was fairly isolated. Now, fortunately through either some outside school activities, maybe like church groups or some outside organization, Boy Scouts, I was able to create some social networks there. I think that both negatively and positively kind of shaped some of my viewpoints. I think to some degree it created a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, to speak, in a negative aspect, but in a positive aspect, it initially created insecurity, but that eventually led to me being very confident and secure because I kind of was able to make it without those social networks early on.
It gives me chills when I hear a young person with limited means, without resources, having that fortitude to overcome and do such remarkable things with their life. It's so many other people would be looking for excuses and reasons why, and I can't or not. So, kudos to you. That's just phenomenal that you overcame that. And you made lemonade out of lemons, I guess is the old saying, right? So where did you go to medical school?
I went to medical school, an osteopathic medical school, William Carey University in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. I was one of the first few classes. They opened, I think, in like 2011. Since then, they've kind of become more nationally known. They put more doctors in small towns and the med school in the country. They're top 100 overall academically. So they've really kind of come a long way. But went to medical school there in Hattiesburg, Mississippi at William Carey.
Very nice. How do you like working? Did you struggle with whether or not, or did you always know you wanted to come back into, I'll call it rural Mississippi, or versus a large town and head out to the big city? Or did you struggle with that at all, or you always knew what you wanted to do?
I did struggle a little bit. And even though I knew I wanted to be a doctor since I was 7 or 8, I mean, obviously throughout high school and college, there were times where I was like, well, looking at other things as well. So, I mean, I think to never waver from your decisions at all is abnormal. I definitely, because I kind of had a somewhat bad experience initially in a small town growing up, I had a little bit of a bad taste for it, but there was many aspects of it that I loved as well. So I definitely wanted to look at other options, but at the end of the day, I wanted to be able to go back and help communities, because there was a bunch of kids like me that didn't have people to kind of look up to in those areas. And, Mississippi always talks about the brain drain. You've got all the successful and intelligent people that kind of leave the state. And I think it's important to go back to those areas and
get back.
Yeah. And this podcast is also, somewhat related on a financial, investing type thing too. And honestly, I mean, Mississippi has the lowest cost of living in America. Doctors who don't make any less than they do in other states. You get paid well to help people as well, and I think that's, part of it too.
Yeah. Your purchase power goes a long way.
Yep. Yes, sir. That's correct.
That's correct. So what's the biggest challenge that you face in the small town as a small town physician, doctor? What's the biggest challenge that you're facing, and what are you learning from it?
Resource management utilization, especially I started the same time COVID started, being a physician in a small town. So being able to get the resources we needed for our small hospitals and communities and for our patients was a struggle.
What kind of resources are you talking about?
I mean, medical drugs, medical treatments, breathing machines, things of that nature. Fortunately, we are associated with a larger system. They were able to help us some, and our state Department of Health, given that we're a very poor state, did a very good job. We have a lot of resources. So that was the issue. I think education of my patients and socioeconomic factors is a huge struggle for me being able to reach them and for them to understand the importance of things, and for them being able to afford drugs, and for them being able to afford to stay home with sick kids and things like that is another big thing there. So I would say maybe kind of the socioeconomic status of the area is probably a big. Yeah,
I was going to ask you that. Do you have a disproportionate amount of your patients that don't carry healthcare insurance, and did you have to tackle that issue at all? Or
my little area, we've got several clinics. My clinic probably has a higher amount of private insurance than some of the other ones. I see there's a university close by, Mississippi State University. Okay. And just by happenstance, I tend to see a lot of professors and people from there that have private insurance. But yes, in general, we have a very high Medicaid population. We have a very high uninsured population, and more so than the national average. So.
Gotcha. And so, and if I heard you correctly, it does make sense to me that there would be challenges in terms of, maybe having the same medical equipment that you'd find at, Sloan or somebody, someplace like that, right? Or a big city. But did you say also, actually it's difficult in the area to get the drugs that are required sometimes?
No, not as much anymore. I mean, during COVID, there was some, when there's back orders on things.
Gotcha.
We had less purchasing power and things like that. Now, like I said, the really important drugs, State Department of Health did do a good job of trying to equally distribute the COVID drugs and things, but it can be an issue sometimes.
How much of a struggle was there resistance in your area to the standard expectations of management of COVID at the time? Was it very much along political lines there, and you struggled with that as well?
Yeah, we don't have to make this a political podcast, but yes, definitely. So, in general, there was a bunch of hesitancy to accept kind of the evolving CDC and state health department guidelines. We had a lower vaccination rate in Mississippi and in my area than other places. There was a lot of resistance there. We had a lot of people going to ag stores and buying ivermectin, which is a drug that some people felt could help with COVID. We had a bunch of stuff like that occurring. So yes, there was a lot of that.
Were you able to overcome it through your personal relationships, or how?
Yeah, I was in a lot of cases. Just talking to people, getting to know them. Not talking down to them. They have their opinion, their belief for a reason. Just because you're more educated than them doesn't mean that you're any better than them. You just have to figure out how to relay your education to them. Now, there was a few, I had horror stories of people on their deathbed being like, I ain't going to do it. I know I'm dying and I ain't going to do it. I've got those stories, but for the most part, people were receptive.
It was an interesting and bizarre time for all of us.
Yes, sir.
What would you describe as your greatest achievement there? Those are some of the obstacles, but what are some of the best things that have happened, or the opportunities, and what have you learned from those?
Just getting community involvement. I reached out to our community leaders when I got here, mayors and the sheriff and everything. And we've, for instance, for the sheriff department, through their leadership and touch up with me, we delivered trauma medical packs to every single classroom in the county. We gave teachers medical training on how to do stop bleeding in event of some natural disaster or shooting, something like that. We hands-on taught every single teacher in the community that. We've increased vaccination rates some in some of the areas. We've been able to kind of get community involvement to work on community projects. We've got several that we're working on right now. So I think just kind of getting the community involved has been something that I was very rewarded in. So
it's very cool. That's very cool. So, now that you're out of school and you're practicing, and what are some things that or ways that you're taking control of your financial future? How are you tackling that? And do you have a plan that you're working through? And I guess the first question is the first thing you tackle is student loans, I would guess.
Yes, you need to have a plan for your loans. You need to have a plan in general. I think before you even go to med school, you need to know you're giving up your 20s of compounding interest. An engineer who started making $80,000 a year at 22, they were compounding positive interest. You're compounding negative interest for student loans. So you need to be thinking about that before even med school. But yeah, student loans, you've got to have a plan for that. You've got some philosophy here because doctors do give up. Do you want to save every dollar till you're 40 and never go out to eat with your wife or have kids and save all money? Probably not. I think there is some, maybe don't go buy a Beamer, but I think there is some philosophy to go ahead and do some things.
Yeah.
Yes. So student loan for me, I looked over stuff. I got a fiduciary financial advisor who is a fiduciary and I know is going to act in my best interest. We looked at loan plans. I work for a not-for-profit. I'm in a public loan service forgiveness program. So I'm not worrying too much about the loans. For me, I looked at the different math numbers. I'm making my minimum required payments through my public service loan forgiveness plan. And I'm focusing more on investing in businesses and in myself. And I think I like having a multi-tiered approach. I like having W-2 income, 1099 income. I like having passive investments, active investments. Real estate can be both passive and active. Kind of depends on how you modulate that.
How do you do it?
So yeah.
What are you doing with real estate now and investing?
So, started out the very first project I did. I flipped a house in residency. My wife was. We just had our first child. We kind of. That was back before I was making much money. I made just enough to secure a loan in the place. And my wife, I would go there in the morning and paint before work. I was working 14 hours a day. And she'd go over there with a brand new baby and help me paint. Yeah. We flipped that one. Did well on it. And right now, I currently own a nice single family, like a Class A neighborhood that's appreciated well and also cash flowing. I own a duplex. One of those is a medium term rental that I do for like nurses, travel nurses, and stuff that's very well cash flowing. The other side is a long term rental. Just started an Airbnb. I own some raw land as well, which I've been looking at some different developmental uses there. So a smaller portfolio, but I'm only 3 years out of actually making money. And I know that real estate, because of multiple ways, you've got debt buy down, you've got appreciation, you've got tax savings. I mean, there's so many different vehicles there. So,
oh yeah, you got to get tied in with a good tax guy too. Really, really important to take advantage of. Especially the big difference between how you realize and take care of things from a tax perspective with your Airbnb versus doing your passive income with tenants that are in place. Yeah. And but you got to have someone that's pretty sharp that'll capitalize on the opportunities that are available for you.
I think as physicians, our biggest issue is going to be our tax burden, and not that we shouldn't pay our fair share. I think that I think that I'm not necessarily anti all taxes, but I mean, well, a lot of people, what they do when they look at taxes is you're just taxing income, or it's not taxing wealth necessarily. Doctors don't really, at my age, have wealth; they have income. Right. So you've got to figure out how to, which is why I like having some 1099 income as well. Right now, I'm probably 3/4 W-2 and about 1/4 1099, and I do that through an S corp. I'm able to, kind of lower my tax burden a little bit there. Real estate is a phenomenal vehicle to be able to help with, depreciation. I mean, you've got fancy stuff like cost segregation. I haven't been able to do that, but I mean, there's just so many things you need to get.
You're into as well. Those are absolutely the right things to be thinking about. Yeah, depreciation and all of it. So very, very good. That's you're ahead of the curve compared to your peer group that's only 3 years out. You're doing well. How's the market holding up there?
Well, most of my properties are in a town called Tupelo, Mississippi. It's where Elvis is from. I like that market because it's got a huge hospital. It's got several large factories, and it's got some tourism with Elvis. So I feel like it's a stable market. It really hasn't changed much. Prices really haven't dropped there. It's nationwide, but it's kind of weird. We're seeing these interest rates shoot up, but prices haven't fallen a whole lot yet.
Right.
Which, as an investor, kind of makes cash flow hard to find if you're looking to buy a cash flowing property. Where I live at is a much more rural area. Prices really haven't changed a whole lot here either. Mississippi, I feel like it's very slow to change, both good and bad.
I would think that you would be less impacted right now. If you were in Boise or Austin or Miami or pick one of those, Vegas or something, they have these really sharp peaks, but then, those valleys come also. And, it would seem to me Mississippi would be a little slower, a little steadier, and not experience both the highs and the lows to the extreme.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And that's when you look at people like on Bigger Pockets and all these things. That's why a lot of them are looking in the Midwest or looking at places like this because they're more steady. Now, you're not at the same time. If you buy a house in San Diego, it doesn't matter how much money you lose right now. 10 years from now, it's probably going to be worth way more.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm talking to you today from Newport Beach in California, just a little bit north of San Diego. But I understand completely what you're saying. You have done a lot of. Let's go back for a second. You described having growing up with limited resources and means, and doing what you could do to get where you're at. You have educated yourself on this entire direction you're going in terms of real estate and investment. Who is the person that you're getting your mentorship from, or are you just doing it all on your own and just, reading away and learning up, watching YouTube, or how are you doing it?
I don't want to say anything is on your own. I mean, no one ever does anything on their own, but I really haven't had an investor mentor. That was really all. I grew up, like I said, great parents, but I grew up hearing arguments about living paycheck to paycheck, as over 50% of Americans do. There was significant stress around money. There's a lot of things that me and my brother wanted to do that we couldn't do because of money. And that even was partly in my decision to become a doctor. Now, I did not become a doctor to make money because it's really not going to sales. If you want to make money, go into sales or something.
Right.
But I knew it was stability. I knew I wanted to help people and everything. And I knew that it was going to be a stable income because we didn't grow up with a lot of that.
Right.
But I also learned in college, I started looking at ways to, this all came from protecting myself. So how can I be safe? So to me, money is security and safety. And that's what money means to me. Hopefully, eventually it means investing in others and helping the community and everything. But really growing up, that meant safety. So I started looking at, well, how can I produce that? And I learned about like assets. So I read Personal Finance for Dummies. I think was the first thing I read at like 19 years old. That led me to reading Personal Finance for Real Estate because it was the same author. The guy who wrote Personal Finance for Dummies also wrote Personal Finance for Real Estate. Real Estate for Dummies. And then that kind of got me in. And then when I was in med schools, when Bigger Pockets got huge, I was always big into podcasts. I bought almost every single Bigger Pockets book. I almost watched every single thing. Then I learned about other real estate investing things, kind of like y'all. And I mean, if I'm in the car, I'm listening to a podcast. Just constantly. And usually I try to read, nothing crazy, like 20 pages of a real estate book a day. I mean, I don't have much time, but I kind of stay consistent with that. I've been doing that now for probably about 7 years. But it kind of came from this. I wanted to protect myself and my family, and how was I going to be able to do that?
Yeah. Very, very cool. Along the way and on your journey, is there someone that the listeners may not know, but you, over the course of educating yourself or meeting people or otherwise, the listeners may not know them, but they should? Is there someone out there that you would recommend?
I'm trying to think of, kind of some individual influencers. And I'm millennial. I'm big on YouTube. I mean, just for general finance stuff. I mean, he has a huge following. Stephen Graham on YouTube, he was a realtor in California. I think he gives really sound financial advice. The Minority Report on YouTube, he just gives really strong financial advice. And I think really before you do anything, controlling your spending, understanding the basics of finance is kind of your core there. Most people nowadays that do real estate know about Bigger Pockets. Not that they're perfect and do everything correctly, but obviously they're a great resource. I'm trying to think in general, there's so many people out there now. I mean, I can't think of anything that kind of goes under the radar, maybe, but there's so many just great. I mean, we just love being able to do these podcasts and YouTube. You can get information so readily. So
yeah, I know it's amazing. I have a son. My youngest son is actually 30. College educated. It just frustrates the heck out of me. We'll be sitting on a couch. He'll have that phone in his hand and he'll be asking me a question where the answer is readily available with just punching in the information that you're looking for and out it comes. So, but yeah, it's interesting. People don't use it as an educational resource as much. The younger people I find don't use it as much for the purposes that you're using it, as much as a social platform to see what their friends are doing or connect with people that way. And, it's just an interesting dynamic. I'm probably a little bit of a nerd. I mean, that's what I haven't watched a TV show. I don't watch anything. Like, I enjoy that. Now, I understand not everyone's built like that. But I mean, I don't watch TV shows. I don't really watch movies. Sometimes me and my wife might get together and watch something in particular. But I mean, yeah, like me having fun at 8:30 at night is like watching a YouTube channel about finance. I mean, I was watching golf over the weekend. The Masters was going, and the guy who actually won it, he was saying, earlier in the week, he was going, "I'm just a golf geek," right? He goes, I wake up at 5:30 in the morning and I'm watching YouTube videos of a golf tournament from 30 years ago or something. He's like, I'm just a geek about about golf. I love what I do. And, it was an interesting dialogue because the person he was playing against is a top golfer, but he care less about it. He doesn't even really like golf. If he wasn't making a living off of it, he wouldn't do it. So it's just interesting. Do people have a different approach? How far are you from Oxford?
I went to Ole Miss undergrad. I'm about an hour south of Oxford. Love that area. Like I said, I live right next to Mississippi State University right now, but college towns are just great. I mean, they're great places. So
you got Lane Kiffin there nowadays, huh?
Yeah, he talk about social media. I mean, that guy knows how to use social media. He's a fun character.
He's an interesting guy.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge sport fanatic, but I enjoy it.
Sure.
I'm not huge into it. I don't keep up with all of it, but I like talking about it and everything. It's fun. So
sure. Well, if any of our listeners wanted to get a hold of you or have a discussion with you, or maybe they're thinking about coming to Mississippi, maybe they're in med school, how would they get a hold of you?
I'm real big on LinkedIn. I think that it's a pretty good social media platform. M. Craig Moffett, DO. So that's M. Craig Moffett, DO, on LinkedIn. I also have, I'm not super big on a lot of the other social medias. That'd probably be the best kind of public place to be able to catch me at there. And I pay attention to the messages, and I usually respond to stuff there. So that'd be the best place.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. What do we got? Is it lunchtime for you right now?
It's about time to go get my kids from preschool. So that's about what time it is.
Right, preschool. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I'm way beyond that. I know you can't tell because my hair is so dark and I look so young, but it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate your vulnerability and your thoughtfulness and your sharing. And it's inspiring to hear what you've done, and I appreciate you coming and joining us today.
I appreciate being on it. I just hope people listen, not just learn stuff from me. But I mean, like you said, I think people underutilize these podcasts and these resources. Not all of them are excellent, but you can learn stuff from people, man. I mean, you could get a homeless guy on this podcast and talk to you, and you learn something from him.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Okay. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.